Just fine, thank you.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, it is. It's a
Yeah,
new year.
it's a new one.
That's right.
The next one. So,
Yeah, let's hope it's better than last one.
yeah.
Oh, well. I don't have any idea how many people will be attending this evening.
As far as planning commission or virtually.
Planning commission.
Yeah, I'd sent an email to Victor and Jeff. I know Jack's the only one that mentioned he couldn't be here.
Right, I saw that also.
Yeah, but I think we'd be all right.
Hopefully. Oops.
And is
Put me in.
oh, Emily's here.
There I am.
There you are.
No. There's that happy face.
Hey, hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone.
Oh,
Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you. You too.
Yes. Something good must have happened. Emily's so happy.
Oh,
Or
I'm usually
maybe
always kind of
it's in her
happy.
nature.
Okay, that's my nature.
Good.
Bill's here, it looks like. I'm 10 months in, 8 months, however many months into I'm learning how to scroll to see who's here and not turn the whole thing off.
Then you got people like Victor that start popping things into your screen and then you lose half of that, everybody.
I keep thinking I'm doing that, and then I realize fortunately he is, so.
It's my evil plan to take over the world.
Right. It's the mask.
Victor, aren't you sitting there by yourself?
Nope, we're 6 feet away from each other at City
Oh, all right.
Hall.
Is Jeff there?
Jeff is here.
Yes. Was it last month you guys figured out if you had both going at the same time, you were getting a loop feedback?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, it really can.
Okay, because we're about 6 feet apart, but I have my mic muted on mine,
Okay.
so you're hearing me through Victor's.
But I have exceptional quality city bought speakers on my laptop, so
All right.
taxpayers' money is being well used here in this situation.
Even with the masks on, you can still hear you, so that's good.
My new look.
Who's that masked man?
Zorro.
Zorro, yeah,
Remember Zorro?
I remember Zorro.
Like we got George Pete's here, Bill's here,
Oh,
Nancy Rondell, I think, is just in the virtual audience. So,
yep.
John Leo.
Andy, I think we just had someone on here.
Okay. Well, we got a minute or two. I think Beth Raleigh is going to make it too.
Good.
If she's not on already.
I think we had someone join by phone as well.
Can you hear? Is that something we'll be able to hear? Is that speaker?
Who's joining us by phone?
I see Jake is on.
Oh, good. Hi, Jake.
Hello.
How's your sister doing?
How are you guys?
How's Beatrice?
She's doing better. She just got surgery.
Is that Tuesday?
Just got surgery. Yeah. Yes. Tuesday. Yeah.
Good. Well, hope she's recovering. You're waiting on her hand and foot, I assume. So.
Oh yeah.
like you always did with your sister.
Absolutely. She doesn't live here anymore to deny that. So.
I think some noses are going to start growing here. I'm
Yeah.
not sure though, but
Oh gosh, is it 5:30 already? So, yeah. It is.
Beth
It
is
is
online.
5:30. Do we have Beth?
Yep.
We have Mary Catherine. I think looks like we got at least more than a quorum, so.
Yeah, we do.
Jeff, would you, or Victor, would you want to call the roll?
Yes, I can do that. Beth Rahali, Mary Catherine Hanna.
I'm here.
Oh, I did hear Beth. All right.
And I'm sorry, Jeff, are we still supposed to say where we are?
Yes, I'm sorry. So please let me know what city that you're in. Back to Beth.
I'm in Harbor Springs.
Mary Catherine Hanna, you're
I'm at my house in Harbor Springs. Yep.
Emily Dubé,
I'm at my house in Harbor Springs.
and Jack Deegan, I believe, is absent. George Pete,
Thought he joined.
I see him here, but it looks like his mic might be muted.
Yeah. Oh, video's muted.
Well, he's here, but we'll come back to him maybe.
All right, we'll come back to him. Bill Mulder
Here, Harbor Springs.
and Mark Bidet. Oh, he is on the phone. All right. And Andrew Bowman
Here in West Traverse Township, technically, Harbor Springs.
and Al Dyka.
I'm here, I'm in Franklin Park,
We have a quorum.
Township.
Great. Do we
And
want
for
to
the
try,
future-
George?
Yep.
Sure, Bowman, in the future, you don't need to say if you're in your house or whatever. I mean, if you're comfortable with that, the law just says you have to say what city you're in. So
Got it.
just in case you don't want people to know you're at home, but obviously most of you look like you're at home.
I'm in Al's basement, so. Okay, so we have did we get George, Pete? I'm sorry, on the roll?
Yeah, I'm here, Harbor
Great.
Springs, Michigan.
Thanks.
Oh, good. All right. It's coming through clear now.
Yep. Minutes, December 17th, 2020, regular meeting. Do we have any comments, corrections?
I saw a correction, possible correction at the top of page 2. Second line. Government should not be in the practice of regulating rather than regulation. Ending in ing.
Okay,
And then a couple lines down where it starts with Pete. Pete stated he sung,
Mhm.
the word missing.
He had some concern.
Probably the word had.
That's correct.
Are you sure you used the word had, Pete, George?
Yes.
Okay.
any other comments or corrections on the minutes? I had one, but it's on the next page. It was in reference to, I think I was just talking about, sorry, I'm not gonna be able to find it too quickly, but it isn't material. It was just that it made it sound like some of the districts, you're not allowed to do accessory living quarters. I think I was talking about the previous conditions when they were only allowed as studios. I just wanted to, of course, now I can't find it, but I don't have
I got it highlighted right here on the page, the screen.
Yeah, there was
page-
another, that's not actually it. I don't know if there was another, I would try to look at this on my computer, but then I would delete the whole meeting and have to start over. It's not material. That's fine. It was just the intent of what I was saying was that it previously they were only allowed in the R1, I think it was A or R1B, and now they're allowed as a special land use everywhere. So
That's on page 2, third paragraph up from the bottom, I think.
that's it. Yep. I think it says Bowman stated in other city districts, guest quarters are not allowed to be constructed. I think that should say that they're allowed by a special land use. So. That's it. Any other comments or corrections on the minutes?
I just had one small one on page, the one that I originally thought you were talking about, page 3, that paragraph, studios, it should not be an apostrophe. It's not possessive. That's all.
Right.
It should be studios, S.
Okay.
Minor thing.
Okay. Any other comments, corrections? we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Support?
I'll second that.
Okay, Emily, support. Probably do a roll call just because of the format.
Al Dika,
Yes.
Bowman,
Yes.
Mark Bidet,
Yes.
Bill Mulder,
Yes.
George Pete,
Yes.
Emily Dubé,
Yes.
Mary Catherine Hannah,
Yep. Yes.
and Beth Rahali.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Back to the agenda since I didn't print one. Any public comments or correspondence for anything that's not on the agenda or items that are on the agenda? And I believe we have, do we have anybody on the YouTube channel making comments or on the phone?
There's no one on the phone right now. We have one person watching YouTube, but no comments.
Okay. We're good there. We can move on to new and old business. Discussion of the missing middle video, Housing North. Jeff was nice enough to send that link out well in advance, so I assume everybody had a chance to watch that. Jeff, did you want to walk us through that, or Larry, the reasons that it's on tonight's agenda?
Well, briefly, this was something that at a previous master plan meeting, I think it was Mary Catherine brought up that she had been to a meeting or something where that was discussed and thought it would be something good to share with us. And then through, further conversation, we thought it was a great idea to have that be part of our process here. Emily is here with us today, and I believe she's, wants to, I think, brief little synopsis of that, and then we can have some discussion.
Great, Emily, and I'm sorry I didn't scroll down far enough to see that you were on the, I would have known if we were in a room, but sorry I missed that. So thank you for coming. So.
No problem. Can you share a screen so I can share my screen? I think I need permission.
Yes. You're free to share.
Aha, success.
Yeah, can you see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, I have a short presentation about housing in general. I hope that's okay to go through that and then sort of end with the missing middle of why that missing middle is important. That was what I was going to do, if that's okay with everyone.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Well, great. Hello, everyone. I wish I was there to meet you in person. I work with the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership and Housing North as the Emmett County Housing Ready Coordinator. And they hired me part-time to sort of bring people together to try to help solve our housing crisis. And the perfect time really to be talking about that is when you're working on a master plan. So it's great that I could be here today to talk a little bit about it. So first off, quickly, you all know this being planning commissioners, but why housing is important. That it's really important to retain and attract our workforce, but also retain and attract employers for our workforce, attract young people and families, allow seniors to stay in the community, reduce long commute times, and all of that is really good for our local economy. So what the problem is here is there isn't housing for our workforce. And this was really driven by a lot of people that care, but really on an economic basis, the Chamber of Commerce, the Petoskey Area Chamber of Commerce saw it as just a critical need for their members, including hospitals and businesses and trade organizations, because people, they can't fill jobs because there's no place to live. And the truth is there's housing crisis all over the country. but ours is just a little bit more complicated because of the resort nature of our community. So we know there's a housing crisis. So the question is like, why don't we just build more? And that's something that it seems really obvious, but there's a lot of barriers and it's not so easy. Construction costs are really high. You probably know that. This summer I was hearing stories of up to $300 a square foot, but $250 was pretty standard. We have a high property costs, lack of infrastructure, labor shortages in the trades, which are working mostly on vacation homes, zoning that restricts the type and amount of homes that can be built, and then public opposition to housing development changes. Things that I've heard you guys talking about, but long-term rentals leaving for short-term rentals, an increase in the percent of our homes going to the second home market. And from talking to realtors this summer, that those numbers are probably higher than they were pre-COVID. A lot of our housing stock that was for sale was bought up by seasonal users. Change in demographics to smaller households. So even though we don't have huge increase in population, as our household sizes go down, there's less homes to house the same number of people. And state programs to help with affordable housing really are designed for urban areas. So first off, I just wanted to also explain that I'm not here just to talk about affordable housing or subsidized housing. It's all housing. We need housing at all market levels except for the $1 million+ houses. So when we talk about housing, what does that mean? I like to just start off by saying, typically we use a number of 2.6 times your annual household income if you're buying a house, 30% of your household income for all your housing costs. And then a number that I didn't know before that I think is more important is that 45% of your household income shouldn't be spent on your housing and your transportation. And why that's important is, you can say, well, there isn't affordable housing here, but so people are having to live in Sheboygan. So if they're buying a place in Sheboygan or renting in Sheboygan and driving to Petoskey or Harbor Springs every day, then their cost for living also goes up. So you can't look at just the 30%. You have to look at that 45% number. So in Emmett County, overall, 26% of our households spend over 30% on their housing. So that doesn't seem that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's not that bad. But when you look at that housing, and that's if you have housing, a lot of people, households in Emmett County had to leave Emmett County to find housing. But that housing and transportation number is what's so interesting is it shows our workforce in Emmett County that 92% of people spend more than 45% on housing and transportation costs. And I found this number to be staggering. I honestly didn't really believe it. And I went through this as housing and a calculator that does this, but it shows it's 92%. And I think what that means is our workforce is driving a long way to find housing. And that all goes back to the economy, because if they're driving a far away, they don't have as much time or money to spend locally. They're also, losing their social capital. They're spending 2 hours in the car. They don't have time to volunteer. They don't have time to do healthy activities related to physical and mental activities, spend time with family and friends, exercise, different things like that. So I think that's a really telling piece of what our problem is. Where we are today in 2019, our area median income, you can see that it's for 1 person, 2 person, and 4 person households, the area median income's between 47 and 68,000. When you times that by 2.6, our affordable home value for them would be between 123,000 and 176,000. And according to Zillow in 2020, our average home value was $222,000. So you can see that you can't afford to buy a house if you can even find a house. So that there's 2 pieces there. So Housing North did a study, a target market analysis they didn't do it themselves, on how many units do we actually need? Because that's what's important, like what are we looking at? And honestly, don't ask me to explain how they did this. I can give you a link to the full study, but these are the summary for Emmett County. It said we need 2,288 new units, of which 1,825 are rental and 463 are for homeowners. Of the rental units, over 1,200 are for the low income, under $650 a month or up to about $26,000 a year. But in our county, we still need over 400 units for the $28,000 to $40,000 household incomes and 174 of over $42,000. So if you think about that, a new teacher, nurse, anyone working in our local workforce or factories, they're, you know, it's hard to find those units. Same with homes. We need 463 new homes, of which 183 are for under $150,000 and 199 for between 70,000 and $175,000 and $250,000. So all sorts of homes, but you can see we also need a significant amount of homes, over $275,000 and over $400,000. And I do know personally, I have a friend who moved to the area in September, and they're looking for a house between $400,000 and $500,000, and there is nothing on the market. They can't find anything. So it's interesting. So the target market analysis does break down to municipalities. So in Harbor Springs, it showed the rental demand in Harbor Springs is a need for 79 new rental units, of which 32 were under $650 a month and 40 were between $700 and $1,000 a month. And the owner demand of houses for 23 new homes, 17 of which would be up to $250,000 and 7 over $250,000. And those numbers don't seem huge, but for a community that only has, 1,150 homes, that's a significant number, increased need for homes there. So what are your challenges in Harbor Springs? There's a lot of them, but you know, I just read recently, I know you're working on short-term rentals, but Harbor Springs has 98 short-term rentals, according to the Granicus company, that's a host compliance of short-term rentals. So that's about 8% of your total housing units. So that's a significant number. And your vacation homes, as you know, you have a huge percent are seasonal in use. Plus you have even higher land values than the rest of the county, which are already high. I talked earlier about how the population has decreased as well as your household size, and you're sort of a built out community. So it's easy to say, you know, we're already built out. How can we do that? We don't have room to grow. But there are solutions, and there's lots of different ones, and there is no one answer. And that's why I'm here to talk to you, because I feel that the entire community needs to take ownership in the problem, and we all need to do a little bit to sort of try to find ways to make our community more housing friendly and provide housing for our workforce. So there's lots of different solutions, which could be things like grants and low interest loans, land donations, tax incentives, public support just on housing needs, policy changes, public-private partnerships. But when it comes to the Planning Commission, I think that there's, you know, potential for zoning changes for more diverse housing options, including different types of housing, multiple family, small urban infill, duplexes, and year-round housing incentives and short-term rental regulations. So there's lots of different things. So what can you do? I sort of broke this in. One, Housing North has a great housing ready checklist, and I think I provided that to Larry. And you can go through it. It's a good time to be doing it when you're working on your master plan, to sort of look at what could be done, both policy related, ordinance related, that you could include in your master plan, and different things you can do. Put this map together really briefly on, the vacant residential lots and public lands in Harbor Springs. So the bright pink color are vacant residential lots, and the other colored are public or quasi-public land, the peach being city-owned, pink being school, and purple being conservancy. So there is, there are lots available that are vacant and potentially some other properties. So to get to the missing middle housing, missing middle housing is just one sort of one idea and one way you can address sort of a more developed area and infill housing of trying to get more density in your community and provide for more housing options for people. It's not really a new idea, but with planning, a lot of times, there's sort of trendy things, and this is sort of a trendy word right now. I want to be clear, missing middle housing is not about income, it's about housing type. So it's a house scale buildings with multiple units in walkable neighborhoods. And so if you look at this, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. So if you see this, the white here is detached single family. Oops. Is detached single family homes. That's our single family zoning district. And up here, these are the big multiple family zoning. And there's all these other types of housing that historically were always around. But when zoning came into play in the middle of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, we did single family zoning and multiple family zoning. And not at any intention, I think we zoned out all these other types of housing because they just didn't fit in. So it's an interesting idea of how to bring those back. And they exist. I assume that a lot of these exist probably in older parts of Harbor Springs. They're all over Petoskey. They're all over urban environments. But it's a good way for, it's easy in a township that has a lot of property to say, oh, you could build, a big new subdivision. It's a lot harder to do in the city limits, which is why I think looking at some missing middle types of housing options for changes in your zoning to allow for them is a way to just do your small part. So it's just one idea. And they're usually always in walkable neighborhoods. So I am not an expert, just so you know, on missing middle. All these slides have come straight from the Missing Middle website, which you can download for free. So I haven't done anything illegal. But this is one of the things they show, like if you were to do missing middle housing right adjacent to your downtown, that you would use a different idea because you'd probably have higher density closer to that area. Where this is, I took one out because I thought it was more appropriate to the city of Harbor Springs, where you have a square, more residential block you can see here, with single family homes are the white. And then your infill housing with other types of housing. I am sorry, I don't know what is printing at my house. So can you cancel it? Sorry about that. So you have different types of housing that just fits in, including duplexes, different types of courtyard buildings, fourplexes or eightplexes that fit in. So there's all different types of missing middle housing types. And what would make sense in Harbor Springs? I think there's lots of different ideas, but you know your community the best and what would work there. So I picked out some that I thought made the most sense, like duplexes. Duplexes by right is something that people have been looking at to allow for more density. If you think about it, as your household sizes have gone down, having a duplex in the area, you probably have less people than you would in a traditional single family house 20 or 30 years ago. But here's different types of duplexes. This one here is actually one in the city of Petoskey. Stacked duplexes, which means up-down duplexes. Again, here's a couple in the city of Petoskey, but they're all different types that can fit right in on a single family lot. A fourplex. Again, if the scale and size of the building fits in and you build at the same front line as your neighboring houses, they can fit right in as well. This one in the corner is in the city of Petoskey. It has a larger front setback that goes in line with the neighboring lots, where some of these other two are built at the front building line related to the neighborhood that it's in. Cabin courts, this is one you have in the city of Harbor Springs. This is the cabin courts at, what is it, Zoll Street in Pennsylvania. So that's a missing middle type of housing that exists. Courtyard buildings, which is usually about 8 to 12 units, sort of like a small apartment building, which has a center courtyard. And a multiplex, which would be, typically closer to the urbanized area, but these are actually two buildings that are in the city of Petoskey, so they exist. So what can the Planning Commission do? First is look at the housing ready checklist while you're doing your master plan. And then the next is, making policy and action items in the plan that are housing friendly. And what those are, there's lots of different ideas, and these are just ideas. And I'm not an expert on your zoning ordinance or to know exactly, like, you might be doing some of these things already, or they might not work at all for your community, but they're ideas of things that you could look at. So one is making zoning changes to make your community more housing friendly and provides, opportunities for some of these missing middle housing types that you think would fit in. So including smaller lot sizes, minimum lot size, minimum dwelling size, duplexes and accessory dwelling units by right, reducing or eliminating parking requirements for residential areas, residential uses. That actually, Traverse City did that recently. Increase in height in certain areas or density in multiple family districts. And even looking at your definition of family, because family has changed over time. Other master plan goals could include things about short-term rentals, year-round housing incentives. Some resort communities out west have deed restriction programs where they actually give a financial incentive to keep housing for year-round residents. So that is something that the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership is looking at doing on a larger scale, but it is a goal you could put in the master plan, is to explore something like that. Incentivize programs for rehabs and infill housing, partnerships with local government and nonprofits working on housing. Analyzing the highest and best use of city properties. Are there any properties that the city could sell or donate to a housing organization to build housing on? And to provide tax incentives when appropriate. And then, of course, the next thing you have to do after your master plan is to make your zoning ordinance amendments, which is always a lot harder than talking about what you want to make, but actually getting those adopted. So that's when the work comes into play. So that's all I had. I sort of went quick through it, and I'm here to answer any questions or provide any more information. So.
Great, thank you, Emily. That was helpful. Does anyone have a question right off the bat for Emily on the missing middle, or more specific to Harbor Springs?
I do, Emily. This is Beth Raleigh. Thank you so much. What are the plans? How are the plans going in Petoskey? Have you made any inroads?
In what way?
Changing zoning, getting new thoughts going, help, with.
They are a little ahead of you. They're just finished a draft master plan that's just went to city council, and they have a lot of good stuff in their master plan. So they've been sort of waiting to make zoning changes because they wanted it in the master plan. So it just went in line with it. So they have a lot of these ideas. Just like I said, the ideas, it's easy in your master plan to have all the ideas, but getting them adopted is always a lot harder. So, but I think a lot of it's in there.
Emily, and as far as what they referenced specifically, and you touched on it, I think the last time we did the master plan, there were kind of programs that maybe still exist but aren't referenced in this. The ideas are the same, but the name, as you said, missing middle is sort of a buzzword right now. But specifically, what have you seen communities put in their master plan, you know, as opposed to just saying, you know, encouraging the city to, you know, explore the ideas of the missing middle. Do they put more specifics in and use the ideas as opposed to just the sort of the brand name?
You know, you could do it that way. You know, when I look at the missing middle, I don't know if all of it really makes sense for the city of Harbor Springs. So it's sort of looking at some of the ideas and what you think would work there. But you could say explore, you know, some of the different types of missing middle housing, like to change the ordinance to allow for them, and try to think the best way you could word something. And then the ones that you're most interested in, you know, you could say, like, for example, you know, looking at allowing duplexes by right in single family districts, or, you know, something like that. But you don't have, I don't think you would have to be that specific in your master plan. I don't know what Larry would think about that.
It all depends on the type of situation we're trying to resolve. You know, one of my questions in this whole thing is, what is, other than what Emily has talked about here this evening, are there other housing concerns that Planning Commission or the city has that we need to be addressing that aren't part of the statistics? Now, the thing that probably came up the most last summer or 2 summers ago was worker type housing. That was a big concern. And we struggled real hard with that up on what was it, State Street, where we had I thought a fairly positive proposal coming for us, and we got a tremendous amount of opposition. So being specific, may be challenging. I think there's got to be a tremendous education program here with residents that bring them along with this whole process of introducing new types of housing into our traditional single family neighborhoods.
And I think, yeah, the one you referenced was actually, you know, was an existing building that had, you know, has been a multi-unit building for years, and it was a, not to go too far into that one, but it highlights what we've experienced in the past, which I'm sure, Emily, you see a lot of, and it was helpful to watch the video, and the gentleman whose name I can't remember that came up with this just said there's a lot of concern on the part of the public when you start talking increased density. And, you know, personally, probably the things that would be easiest to put in the master plan to consider, not to commit to making changes, but to consider, encourage exploring them are a minimum lot size, and we do actually have a cottage district, the Bay Street cottages that you put a picture in. That was an old motel, as everybody remembers, and it was that. So the cottage overlay exists in the zoning code, but it's very, very specific, and it requires I think it's almost an acre or more. So it doesn't apply to many of the vacant properties that still remain. I think one other property on the south side of Lake Street years ago was able to make use of that part of the code. So it's in there, but the lot requirement's so big, it's really almost probably a built out use at this point, unless you change something. So does anybody else have any specific questions or thoughts on the presentation or the video that we watched?
I've got one for Emily. This is Bill. Hi, Emily. Hope you're doing well. In the question and answer after Dan Parola spoke, and in the video, he made a suggestion that maybe Housing North could, you know, engage maybe his firm or somebody else to kind of put together a cookbook of possible ordinances and you know, principles that could be used across all the different jurisdictions in Northwest Michigan. And I'd be really interested in, you know, seeing if that came to fruition and what we could pick from that and save a lot of time and effort. Do you know if that's going to happen? Has anybody engaged his firm or taking a step on that?
That's a great question. We talked about it on a regional basis, and I was just talking to Charlevoix County about looking at having Charlevoix Emmett do it together, because I feel like our communities are very similar. And so we were just talking about that today. So there's still talk of it, but they haven't been engaged yet to do it.
All right, so a timeline, we may be on our own to take it, you know, to the next step, but you know, we would definitely be interested in seeing whatever comes up on a regional basis.
One of thoughts would be that in your master plan, if you have good language to pursue that, it actually might be the right timing, because once the, if we were to be able to develop some model ordinances, then you would be at a point where you could actually look at which ones, you might want to try to adopt.
Okay, great.
So that would be something to think about. I think the definition of family is also important and might help with some of your issues related to worker housing. I'm not sure what you call that for a group of people.
And actually, after it was a year or two ago, the State Street building that Larry referenced, we did, I think Jim Raymer's updated, not that it may not need it again, but we did have what you would expect from a 45 or 55-year-old zoning ordinance is the definition of family. And I think, Victor, didn't we update that, or Jeff? That did get updated, didn't it?
We did, yes. We had an issue that prompted the necessity to do that, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And we found that our definition was a bit outdated, and we looked at a lot of other communities and what they've done. And I think Jim Raymer may have actually looked at some court cases that had some things to do with that. And we did revise our family definition to be quite a bit more broad than what it previously was.
Great.
Victor, can you tell me what the definition, the new definition was? Not word for word, but just broadly.
We'll have to pull that one up.
If you give me a minute or two, I can pull up our zoning code and I can grab that for you.
Any other questions specifically for Emily or on the video that we all watched?
We got a comment on YouTube from Kristen Balog from the Historical Society who said, "I learned a lot. Thank you for the detailed information."
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for the comment. Bill brought up the question and answer. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about how this is going to affect our schools, because as a high school student in Harbor Springs, I don't think that we can have the capacity for 100+ more kids if we're looking at making residency for 2,000+ people.
I think, Jake, I think the numbers for Harbor were probably a little bit smaller than the 2,000. That may have been for the Emmett County, I think.
Okay, got it.
And I graduated, well, they gave me a piece of paper. I think I graduated. It was 67 kids. I don't know how many in your class, but I think the most they've ever had maybe was pushing 100, and that probably, a limited number. If say we were able to add, a certain amount, the number of age groups of families that have kids in the school system, it might only be a percentage of that. So, but that's a good question.
Right. I mean, household composition has changed dramatically, but even if you look at the census data, Harbor Springs has shrunk by, that's gone down from 1,500 to about a little over 1,100 or a little over 1,000 just in the past 10 years. So, I mean, we have capacity to go back up again. I'm not sure, how much bigger than that, but
yeah.
And our school district certainly spans more than the city of Harbor Springs, but yes.
That's a good question, Jake. And I think that just emphasizes the need to remember when we do pursue these things to be as collaborative as possible and communicate with the schools and others interested parties, because we would want to know, what kind of, before there's a problem, we want to probably, nip any problem in the bud if there would be a problem with, let's say we have an apartment building and all of a sudden 20 kids are in the school. That's a lot for that. So we want to make sure that we're talking with the school on all of these initiatives, so at least they're prepared. So I think that's a good question, Jake. We want to think more than just, there's more parties involved as well.
I think to Bill's point about that was at the end of the video, the question and answer, even if we don't end up with regional zoning kind of common elements, which I think was a good point, builders would certainly like it, as they know they go from one town to the next, there's some similarity, but at least with the West Traverse, Little Traverse Township, I know they have their own zoning. It's not Emmett County zoning. I think Pleasant View Township might have their own as well. So the most of the bordering townships with Harbor Springs would obviously, that's where a lot of the opportunity to add housing probably is, more so than in the city limits, just from sheer numbers of vacant acres. But that might be where you could regionalize on a really small basis, versus if it doesn't work out, that we have a common zoning elements with Charlevoix or the other counties.
Well, and that certainly is a huge effort of the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership, is to, push education out to all of those different planning entities, or entities who plan, units of government who have planning groups. Number one, around education, but number two, around collaboration and cooperation. And I know that's a big part of what Emily's been focusing on, so.
Emily, I have a question. I know Jeff also has a definition of family, but in your experience, I guess limitation of infrastructure and utilities. I think that's one big thing, because the city of Harbor Springs, we supply infrastructure to like waters and electric to the surrounding townships as well. And there's certain areas even of town where we don't necessarily have wastewater or whatever. So like, I think that's going to be one of the more financially bigger impediments for some of these projects. And I was wondering how other communities deal with the infrastructure aspect of some of these initiatives.
Sometimes they just pay for it and look at the tax return in the long haul. They look at maybe like a TIF district or brownfield money. So there are different ways. There are some grants available for infrastructure for housing.
Okay.
So it just really depends on the site and on the project. So that's what, that's one of the things I'm here to help do, is if we had a potential site for, maybe some housing to work with, the USDA has some grants, the Brownfield has some grants, different ways to look at bringing that money together.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Emily. Jeff has a definition of a family.
Yeah, I'm not going to read through the whole thing. It's quite lengthy now.
I can find it.
Yeah,
I just wanted a broad, fast, but don't take up time. That's okay.
Oh no, it's okay. I'm just going to quickly paraphrase a little bit of it here, but it's item number 10 in our definitions section, and it's on page 8 of our zoning code, if you would like to go and look at the whole thing. But what we do is we provide a couple of different definitions or ideas here regarding what a family unit could be. For instance, one of them is a group not exceeding 4 unrelated persons, but also not exceeding 8 in total, all of whom are domiciled together as one functional unit. So kind of just describing a group of individuals and how they might, interact together. We also have a couple other ideas. We also specify a couple of things that we define as not being what a family might be and how a building might be used, such as dormitory, fraternity, sorority, or associations or lodges. So it's a little bit lengthy, and we provide a couple of different ways that people could reside together as a family unit or function. So it's a little bit of an interesting read, but that was basically based on the information that we found when we were researching this a couple of years ago, that would work and be something that helps us define what a family could be, but also then if for some reason we had a court case, it would be defensible in court as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions for Emily? Well, Emily, thank you very much. That was the timing is very good, obviously, and I'm sorry I missed that you were on the call in the beginning, but didn't scroll down far enough. So with that, do we want to move on to the next item?
Well, if I could, Andrew, just for a moment, make a couple of comments.
Sure.
I think this is a very important issue in the city of Harbor Springs, trying to find alternate types of housing in the community and places to put them. And a lot of what Emily says makes a tremendous amount of sense. Now, in my opinion, I don't think we'd want to take, as an example, the missing middle type of housing and just try to find one central area to put that. And for an example, there's a large vacant piece of property across from Perry Farms on the south side of Lake Street that could accommodate a lot of housing. And it's probably the largest vacant piece of property that's in the city. But I don't think, in my opinion, that's appropriate to put a lot of very dense housing in a very specific location. And that's probably not a very good location anyways, because it's not walkable to anything. It's a long way from downtown. The only employment source would be Perry Farms right across the street. Now, Mary Catherine may like that, but it may not accommodate a lot of other businesses though. But there's a lot of, I started back in the summer to make a list of what I thought were vacant lots in the city. And I got about 12 of them or so, that if we could figure out the best way to modify our zoning code to allow these different housing units, missing middle, if you will, in those neighborhoods, and to educate people in such a way that they would be accommodating to them to put a duplex or a fourplex in the neighborhood, which, you know, it goes against the grain of a lot of people, very honestly. And it's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be a real challenge, but I think we can be up to it if we want to do that. I think it's possible. But to concentrate a whole bunch of them in one area, I think would be, in my opinion, a disaster. We got to think about above the bluff, below the bluff. Below the bluff, on the lower side, the lake side of the bluff is really the best location for the housing because it's so walkable. But it's the most expensive land we have, and it's the most developed. I don't think there's anything. We look for, we plan by square inches on the downside of the bluff, not by, square feet or acres. Above the bluff is probably the most logical location, or the most easily placed location is where we have more vacant land, but it doesn't meet that walkable trait. And so maybe we need to start, we need to think about also during the season, a transportation system that can help accommodate that some way. And there's a lot of different ways to handle that. So it's just some thoughts, I think, that I wanted to share with you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you, Larry. And I think that, kind of in keeping with the character of town, apartment, large scale apartment buildings, that part, and that's sort of not really the missing middle, but a cottage courtyard, that kind of thing on the properties on Lake Street. There actually is, there are two on Lake Street. One is the old, it's called Harbor Garden. It's some duplex buildings. They're across sort of from Benchmark Engineering, and then there's another one a little further down. But that, and then I think below the bluff, really the infill. If we were to, someone had to ask, what will we add to the master plan now? Would be the goal of exploring, making infill projects, whether it's on a single family home lot or a multiple use lot, easier to do, and just that might be a broad enough goal that through the zoning changes you could get there eventually. So
and
Andrew, I have a couple. Oh, so go ahead, Mary Catherine. I had a couple comments from the John Leo and Nancy Rondell, but I'll let you go first.
I was just going to say, to just keep in mind that as Emily mentioned, the missing middle is not specifically about low income or workforce. It is just about housing types. And I think if we're very clear about that and working on it, it makes it a much more neutral thing. You can build incredibly high-end duplexes and quadplexes. Look at the project on Main Street. This is just about getting more housing and getting us used to a slightly higher density, which is actually going back in time, of course, to what people were used to in downtown cores and not what we now have. So I want us to be really careful, especially when we talk about this and talk about missing middle, to not talk about it as specifically for either low income or working people, that this is just about housing types, not about aiming the housing or the development at any particular income bracket or any particular price point. Thank you.
it's a good reminder. Thank you.
And the other quick hit, I think, when the time comes, is to work on accessory dwelling units. And a lot of jurisdictions are really easing up on the types of extra dwelling units you can have on a property and who can live there, like we were talking about in our last meeting. So I look forward to working on that when the time comes too. I think that's a really quick hit. to get more.
That's a good point, Bill. And Victor, if you could go through this, what we have, we don't want to miss the comments when they're still relevant on the online.
So from John Leo, we have, I do not agree with Larry's assessment of the property across from Perry Farm. It is within walking distance of downtown. I do agree with the need for evaluation of possible locations, taking into account costs and other factors. I live in that neighborhood, so I'm very familiar. Nancy Rondell says, would it be an option to expand our city limits to help have areas for more housing? It is going to be very important to be willing to think outside of our comfort zone to make housing available. And then John Leo, great clarification, Mary Catherine.
Great. Thank you for the comments.
Can
And
I
the only
add
one
anything,
go ahead.
Chairman Bowman?
I'm sorry, I can't tell who it is.
Oh, it's Emily Meyerson.
Oh, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when it comes to some of this, the idea, that was where I was picking, you could pick different housing types. And the zoning would just be allowing like a duplex by right in infill housing. Just like Mary Catherine said, it isn't about creating affordable housing. So it's not about creating one big development. And that's why I think missing middle makes so much sense for urban communities and not for townships. It doesn't really make sense to be out in the middle of Bliss Township and have, this dense, neighborhood built, even though there's land there. But you can use pieces on your vacant properties in redevelopment of properties. And even like maybe buildings that are being redone to have like work units, different things like that. So I think it's very flexible.
Yep. I think the one comment that was at the end of the video when he was the question we all want answered, and even the gentleman that did the video didn't really have the answer, which is how to get balanced short-term rental pressure. That really is something that we need and we want, but I think that's going to be, and we talked about including some language in the master plan to really keep an eye on that. And maybe instead of, I don't know if any communities have been successful in providing incentives to people to build or maintain a unit as a long-term rental as opposed to short-term, because you certainly need that. That's always been our employee housing, and those have really gotten, whether it's attrition through non-conforming use that when they're vacated, they can no longer be used. I think that's been happening some in the city, which we ought to take a look at fixing that problem. And also just simple dollars and cents, it's worth more on a nightly or weekly basis than it is on a long-term basis. So that's something we should probably talk about putting in the master plan, I think. So
That leads to a question that I have. I'm not at all saying that we shouldn't alter the zoning ordinances to allow for different types of houses to be built more easily. However, I would ask, it's a question kind of to those of you who have been on this commission for a longer period of time. Is it really that off-putting, and is it really the zoning ordinances that are preventing people from building these types of houses over the last 20 years? Or is it purely profitability and desire for the types of houses that we currently have?
George, I think going back a little ways, the accessory living quarters, the zoning code definitely was a major hurdle, and that was changed maybe 15 years ago, where you could now do that as a special land use as opposed to just the two districts, R1A. I can't remember the exact which one it was, but and some of it is just people's preferences on the types of housing that they want to buy and build.
So I think, overall, we need to figure out a way then, if this is something that we really want to incorporate in our community, is, to incentivize this type of building as well, not just altering the zoning code to allow it, but actually, get behind it somehow.
And I think what our job is to do at this point is to put the possibility in the master plan and encourage it to be explored, but really it's going to come down to input from the public, what's adopted and what's not adopted. So our job is to think ahead, and if that's what the master plan is looking out 5 years, it ought to include the encouragement to look at this, and then what the public's reaction to it is, it remains to be seen. So.
Good discussion.
Great
All right.
decision.
I think at this point, Emily, thank you very much. Oops, I think I just got rid of the whole meeting. Still there?
Not yet.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Let's see, I can't see it now, but there we go. So if we, thank you for coming and I'm sure we'll be in touch and have more questions for you, and feel free, anybody on the planning commission, to reach out to Emily as much as she has time for. So.
Thanks, Emily. That was great.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Move on now to the existing conditions draft, picking up, looks like we're at page 35, chapter 8. And we're sort of jumping back into this after a pause for a little bit. So Larry, if you could possibly just sort of bring us up to speed with a brief summary of what we covered and where we left off.
Well, we've talked about the first 7 chapters, and we ended this discussion back in, I guess it was October the 1st of last year. And we ended on page 34. And so we were going to start the discussion this evening, again, starting with utilities and transportation, and the whole notion on how it's been working. And I know not all of you have been involved in this process, but everyone has hopefully read page 35 to the end in its entirety, and maybe found comments that you would like to make or other information you'd like to see added or explored with our background analysis of the city that usually gets incorporated in the master plan in one form or another, whether it's in the body or whether it's in the appendix or a separate document. We've had some discussions with Planning Commission over time that, why does this have to be the introductory piece to our whole master plan when it's probably the least used? So it just sets forth who we are and what we are in the city, in all the various elements that affect planning for the physical environment of the city of Harbor Springs. So that's what the purpose is. And so here we are at chapter 8. And I don't know, Andrew, if you want me to lead this or you want to lead this discussion?
Larry, I actually just wanted to, Victor, there were a couple comments perhaps online. I think there were a couple people thanking Emily. If you would mind going through those if they're on there. I forgot to ask. So.
There was Emily Meyerson just said, thank you for your time and great discussion.
Okay, thought I saw it pop up at the bottom, but so.
Yep.
Great. I apologize if I forget to ask for the YouTube comments, and don't hesitate to interrupt me. Well, I guess I can just go through starting at chapter 8, utilities and transportation. Not a little dry section of the master plan, but did anybody have anything jump out? Al, I think you had made a comment a while back about the actual aquifer. I think is that
Corrected that.
we did correct that, yeah. And really, we rely on the city, the water and sewer department to get all this, any statistics for this part of it correct. So
that is correct. Yeah, these are basically just facts. And with that whole discussion of housing and increasing density, these systems become extremely important because they have a limited capacity as to what they can serve. And that's why the city system, as Victor stated earlier, it goes out and services urban or dense population in the townships. And there's probably contracts with those adjacent communities, and the treatment plants have capacities also. So what we do with housing has to be extremely coordinated with our contract limits of those utilities and also the physical limits of those utilities, and how all that fits together. So it's just an element that we have to balance.
Yeah. Question. Is it appropriate to include the carrying capacity of these utilities as well as the scalability?
We can, it's probably possible, something we'd have to investigate. But I don't want to get it down to a numbers game of how all of this works. It's certainly not my expertise. But at the same time, I'm sure there's people within the utility department or possibly Victor that has those kind of numbers that can generally share them with us.
I could look to Tina and Nick to see what kind of, there's a lot to it, but I mean, because one of the problems that we have is when we do these kinds of analysis is separating those who are within the city limits versus those within the whole system. And, you know, the master plan, we're also, it's for me, just from my point of view, is we're planning for the city, but we have these utilities that go beyond the city. So, you know, we gotta, what part of the conversation are we focusing on? Our utility size in general, but are we talking about the utilities that serve our residents? So I think that's part of the discussion, but we can probably find certain numbers for you and get those to you if it's necessary.
But also, I mean, this is our master plan looking forward. So, I mean, yes, this is a statement about where we are currently, but, you know, thinking about the housing discussion, thinking about the change in housing patterns, how people are using properties. I'm sure we have much bigger swings now than they did previously in terms of summer usage versus winter usage, and thinking about where we want to be in 5 years or 10 years in terms of our city. So, I mean, yes, stating what the situation on the ground is, but this is also a policy statement about where we're headed.
Yeah, any specific amendments that people would want to suggest, or maybe it's something where we ought to acknowledge that there are obligations, you know, that the city has for townships outside the city limits that are using these same resources. So I don't know if I think putting a number on it, that number is probably going to, it doesn't really change a whole lot what the capacity is. It's been quite some time since they expanded the sewer system much.
I think we did that about 20 years ago.
Yeah, and then the wells.
Yeah, well, with the sewer system, I was on the authority back then. And each of the units of government that are part of the authority, we each told the authority how much growth we expected in the next 25 years, the life of the plant. And the city has a certain number of units that we can use. It's hundreds, but like Alanson expected to expand a lot. So they bought many more units so they could expand greater than we could. And, but it's finite. I guess that's what I'm getting at. That will be a controlling factor in the growth and density, is we have a finite number of the sewage units that were allocated.
And that might be exactly the number that George's suggestion should be. You know, I mean, if that number is finite, then we ought to at least perhaps, have that acknowledged in the master plan. So if there's some way, Larry, you could potentially incorporate that. Does that satisfy your question, George?
It does. Thank you.
It does, and Andy, and I think to go off Al's point there, just as something that we also should consider when we're doing this plan is, yeah, we are nearing that point where eventually we're going to need to buy some more units, and we're just very unsure about, any kind of change in year-round residency for people who have second homes that decide to, as we've seen through the pandemic, more people are living here longer, just without even adding new homes or new houses, how that's affecting our wastewater usage and what's allocated to us. So we could not even add another house, and we have all of a sudden 100 homeowners decide to stay to become year-round residents, and then we're already at our capacity. I mean, that's not the exact number, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. So we definitely are, and Nick and I at the office are definitely in tune with the sewer authority and trying to where we need to be at in the next few years if we need to buy more capacity. So that's a good point, Al and George. So thanks.
Larry, does that give you enough, Larry, to kind of go on?
Oh, yes. And we got to couple that though with guest quarters too in our discussions regarding that, because if you will, that increases our density. And if we, take the rules and move them away and just allow that to be lived in a year-round unit, that adds one more unit that contributes to the consumption of water and the production of wastewater. So that we need to look at that too very carefully. So anyways, well, yes, that gives me enough, and I think we can pull something reasonable together that will help us in our planning efforts.
Larry,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say I have one suggestion about this structure, but Andy, if you still have something about water or wastewater, I'll let you go first.
Nope. Nope, that's fine.
My suggestion is that I think we should put renewable energy after other utilities, and instead of labeling just other utilities, I think we need probably a section on electric, because that's a big, it's our own fund here. We have our own electric fund. So I think we need to highlight that as its own subsection like we did for water and wastewater, and say city's electric distribution system or electric department, whatever we want to call this, the heading. And I think then the renewable energy should come after that, and then we can talk about other utilities like natural gas and all that stuff. But specifically under the renewable energy, I'm not very comfortable saying that the Harbor Springs Area Sewer Authority made commitments to increasing reliance on renewable energy. We've discussed with the sewer authority, but they have 100 acres there that we've looked at potentially putting solar panels on, because we get more money for that. That means that could pay our increase in units that we need in the future if we lease it out to a company that wants to put solar panels on there. But the authority hasn't made any commitments. They just have discussed it. So maybe we just change that word from commit to have discussed increasing our reliance on renewable energy.
Okay.
I don't want the sewer authority to come back and say we've never made a commitment to that. So that's my thought there.
Is everybody in agreement with Victor's suggestions on separating the electric utility and talking about that, because it is a pretty unique thing that a town of our size, I think, has its own electrical utility, and then also moving the renewable energy down below the other utilities. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep, that's great.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on page 35? I guess we sort of flipped down to the top of 36, so we can move to transportation.
I had a question, it's Emily, about transportation on the top of 37. I wasn't sure at the bottom it's the continuing paragraph from page 36 at the very bottom, the need for incomes. I wasn't sure why it was important to mention that all different kinds of incomes are needed for that area with bikes and sidewalks and such. I didn't know.
Does that make sense?
Right here, okay. I have it highlighted on my screen.
And Emily, that was similar to that. I think a lot of times in the master plan we've referenced, we use the word seasonal and then usually followed up with vacation. I think there are a lot of people that come here seasonally that aren't necessarily always on vacation. So maybe we just talk about year-round and seasonal residents. We were trying to create a uniform, as opposed to full-time. We sort of used year-round and seasonal, but I think we could take out vacation throughout the document.
Well, I think the part that just the word incomes, like that
Yeah.
third, is that what you're talking about, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. I think your change makes sense at the bottom, and then it because we were in the same paragraph, I think if we took out, if everybody's in agreement, just not everybody that comes here seasonally is on vacation. So.
Right. Yeah.
Well, but I in all the talk about housing, we talked about walkable communities and the fact that part of Emily's presentation on housing was about this combination of the cost of housing plus transportation. I mean, one acknowledgement about having non-motorized trails is that people can use them to access work when they don't have a car. And I know there aren't a lot of people up here in our part of the world who commute via trail, but I know of two people because I run into them almost every morning when I am walking, and they are on their bicycles going to work every morning, rain or shine, summer or winter, fat tire bicycle or not. So I don't think it's irrelevant to mention it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the including or excluding the reference to all incomes and ages?
Well, I guess my only question would be, would we design a sidewalks, bike lanes, and public transit differently for different incomes? And I guess the answer for public transport might be, all different incomes need different types of transport. But as far as actually just, sidewalks and bike lanes, we're doing that for the community regardless. So maybe it needs a little thought on how to reword it but I guess I'm not indifferent, but I don't see the harm or the of leaving it in there. I mean,
would it if we were going to contemplate a change, would it make sense to be more specific about the uses of these non-motorized pathways than necessarily getting specific about who's using them? Is that, it's commuting, it's recreation, exercise. So I don't know, that I think I'm okay with it the way it is, or we could consider a change.
What if we just put a period after all and struck the words incomes and ages? It's accessible for all, period.
I think part of the problem that I think what Mary Catherine might also like a good point be brought up is, let's say we try to apply for a grant that's, for age specific, right? And are you trying to design your bikes and your transit for age specific people? And if you leave out the word age, then they'll see like, all right, you maybe not trying, this grant it might be harder to get that grant basically if you don't have a focus on something about age, for example,
Okay.
or income. So so sometimes we throw these, Andy was saying here, sometimes we throw these words in there because it also helps us get grants as well.
Or if your trail, if you want to be deliberate and specific about where your trail goes. Look, our community is really small. Pretty much our sidewalks and our trails are going to connect all parts of the community. But there are communities in which trails or other sidewalks don't go in certain areas. And so for good reasons and bad reasons, but some of the reasons have to do with specifically not connecting those parts of the community to other parts of the community. And I wouldn't want us to ever be accused of doing that in Harbor Springs.
Okay, I think everyone feel comfortable then leaving the language based on the idea that it might, possibly down the road, open up grant opportunities.
Yeah.
Yep, all right.
Great.
I do have one suggestion also under Harbor Springs Historic Boardwalk. We were looking at the grant, the TAP grant that we need to apply to if we would want to find funding for this. And it requires either something in our master plan or a resolution by council about something about complete streets and trying to, it's a philosophy of combining bike paths and sidewalks. And I'm Larry, I'm sure you're well aware of it, but that grant requires, the discussion and goals of having complete streets. And I'm just wondering if where and how we should incorporate that into this section.
Well, again, this is the background information here. When we get into the actual writing of the plan, we have a section that we can write about on complete streets, where we knit all those transportation systems together.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if it's worth saying that we've been striving to achieve that, like in the past, by having the bike trail come in, by building more sidewalks, if we should maybe say something like that. But I'll leave that. If it's better off and just in the other section, that's fine as well.
Okay, well, we could certainly put under the general heading of transportation a notion like that under on page 36. I'll make a note to that.
Victor, will we need that in writing before we might finish the whole master plan, or is there time to get it in a separate section some months from now?
So we don't plan at this time applying for that grant till June is when it would be due. So as long as we have it, if this is not done by June, we'll just go to council to get a resolution on complete streets. But if that's the question you're asking, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we would support whatever the grant process was with our timing.
Yeah. I think we should have a master plan in place, right, Larry?
I would hope so.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any more comments on, I think we've scrolled up, so now back to, we're kind of down by the boardwalk, historical boardwalk, city sidewalks. Any comments or concerns? These are more statistical, looks like.
I'm just surprised how many miles of sidewalks there are. That's amazing.
It's a half marathon right in town, so.
Yeah, and a lot to maintain, and we could even use some more in places.
Okay. Moving on to 38, Wheelway, and other opportunities for non-motorized pathways. Any thoughts or comments on these first paragraphs? They're pretty well done. Electrical vehicle and bike charging stations.
I wanted to actually go back to the FEMA thing. I read that and it's great and it seems up to date. But I believe some of the dates.
Excuse me, George, what page are you on?
Let's see. Yeah. Exactly. Victor just highlighted it. And then I think there was even more, there was a little bit more in depth on that somewhere else with some dates.
I'm so
Not
sorry.
mine. Not my
Well,
fault.
I didn't know they still made that ringtone.
I'm so sorry. So sorry.
Oh, or,
I guess it's further down. There was another place where there were some specific dates.
were there the maps? Was it further down, George, where the map?
Yeah, it was in the maps. Yep, you're right.
Right.
I can wait until we get down there.
Okay, but any comments on the, because, you know, I think originally the idea was to run through that, but that remains to be seen.
Right.
So,
There was somebody in it today.
was there somebody in it today? Oh, go ahead. So, electric vehicle, bicycle charging stations, any comment? I think there is a charging station down by the Harbor Master, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
We just put that in a couple months ago.
Don't try to charge your phone from that, it doesn't work.
You tried that, huh?
Yeah. Flood zones, are we getting, George, are we getting into the part with flood zones where you,
Yep.
okay. Go ahead. I think we're
Seems
there.
like this will probably need to be edited by the time this master plan has to get finished, because these dates will have passed and there will be resolutions regarding some of these things that are written in here. Yeah, like this will be published in 2020. Yeah, so should we, it says about the infrastructure improvements of Harbor Springs, December 2019 to mitigate this. So I don't know, I feel like when I was reading it, some of it, you know, by now or by the spring will be able to be removed and we can have some
just
solid.
Sort of updated as terms of what's become past tense or.
Exactly.
Okay. Everybody, obviously that makes sense. Anyone have any other thoughts on that, or is that enough, Larry, for you to go on?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the shade drain or the FEMA mapping? I think we can.
Is it still, I mean, it looked like there were people actually building a huge gate across the opening today. So I take it that's not ever going to be a pedestrian tunnel or anything?
So the goal is to make it well, so you see the construction that's still going on there. They still have some work left to do on putting in one of the handrails in. So there's steps there that would lead from the sidewalk, and our goal right now, as is not to keep it as a pedestrian walkway. However, the goal is to have the bike path go underneath, to use that spillway to go underneath M119. So yes, it is in the future, but the way it was built originally wasn't intended for pedestrians. It wasn't the purpose, but it can accommodate pedestrians. So we hope that the bike trail can go underneath there. We're still waiting to hear back from the state on whether they would allow it.
Okay, so that's sort of out of our control. So.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that page? I've lost the number. I think we're on 39.
39. Yep.
Now we get into these high resolution maps. I'm sure everybody can read these without a problem. So they are easier in the paper version. So, and these will all obviously be updated. Any changes that would be reflected in the 2021.
Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
Feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts on the water distribution map of Harbor Springs as we go by.
I believe higher resolution versions of these are on our city website.
Yeah, you can actually zoom in. They're pretty good. You know, if you need to find out, these are kind of helpful to find out where the water mains are and who's on a well still in the city and things like that. So, and since I keep forgetting, have we had any comments on YouTube or the phone for?
Nope.
Okay.
No comments.
All right. We just.
Mark Bidet did say a little bit ago that he had to leave the meeting.
Okay.
I don't know if he left or not.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we can keep scrolling down and just not to go too quickly through these, but I imagine they don't require a lot of comment from us.
No, I think the key is making sure they're up to date when we get to the point of publishing the master plan, that those maps are the most up to date we have. So everything is current.
Great.
I don't know if there's any proposed changes in those, the upcoming from utility improvements. But we'll coordinate that with Victor and the city staff to make sure that they're as up to date as they can be.
And I apologize if this is already in there, but is there a map of the non-motorized pathways in the city? I mean, there aren't a tremendous number. I think it's really the wheelway coming into town, and there's
Just not in here.
yeah.
I don't think we have that in here.
I
We
don't know
have
if that's,
maps of sidewalks. I don't know if it's in here though.
or if it could be, or maybe they're added. Maybe it makes sense to add them to the sidewalk map. That's. I know.
And I guess
That
the
makes
same could be
sense.
said about electric as well. We don't have electric map of our distribution, but may not be necessary. I think we serve the entire city limits with electricity, so.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other comments or questions on the review of the final chapters of the master plan as it sits?
I think page 44 needs to go.
Yep, that's
We can keep it. Sometimes saying nothing at all is the best thing.
that's right. That's the clean slate. And I apologize, Victor, if you could go back up to the agenda. I think this is our last item other than member comments, but I forgot to print the.
No,
Yeah,
I think
so I guess, Larry, if I just explain the next part from us, or if Larry, you want to explain what's happening next with the master plan?
well, I'll try, then you can fill in the gaps if anything I miss. How's that? Our next meeting is scheduled for the first Thursday in February. And we'll hopefully be looking at survey results so we can start to indicate how the citizens feel in the community about the questions that we've been asking them that were based on the goals that we had prepared a while back. And then we can start working on filling in the objectives of how are we going to make those goals become real given the community comments. And we can start drafting those objectives based on citizen input. We can then have more conversations regarding very specific items. I know a few months ago I put out a request for your specific planning commission positive and negative comments. I got one sheet back. I'm going to give it to Jeff again and have him redistribute it to each of you, and hopefully we can get that information coming back or have a discussion of it at a meeting, one of the two, whichever you prefer to do. And what I'm looking for there is, even though this is a master plan and we're looking into the future, there's lots of things in this community that we want to make sure we don't lose sight of. The very positive elements that are there that make Harbor Springs what it is today. So we don't want to make changes into the future or start suggesting adjustments that are going to start changing the fabric of the community itself. So having a good idea as a group as to what each of you think, what are those positive things that are there in the community that we don't want to see changed over the next 20 years? And what are those things that we do want to see maybe altered a bit so we can make it a better community? So those are, your perspectives in these ideas are, in my opinion, extremely important because you're the planning commission. And if you will, that's your job, is to think about those things because you're the keepers and writers of the master plan. It becomes your document to implement over time. The things that we want to change and the things that we want to preserve, in my opinion, in my experience, is extremely important. So I'll get that to Jeff tomorrow, and he can redistribute that for your work and thought on those ideas. What did I miss, Victor?
Oh, I think you nailed it. I just wanted to let the planning commission know, as you probably do know, we mailed a link to the survey, snail mail to every single property owner in the city. So everyone by now probably has received a letter asking them to take the master plan online. We ship those out probably in around December 20th, 21st. So we're having a lot of survey responses trickle in. So we're probably going to see several hundred responses from the public on each plan, ranging probably between 150 and 400. So I think we're going to have a good response rate that's reflective of the community. So that's all I wanted to add.
So we're going to go over the survey responses in a future meeting or in our next meeting a month from.
Our next master plan meeting, which was the first Thursday in February, the next planning commission meeting will be regular planning commission. Well, I mean, site plan stuff. Right?
Hey, Victor, Larry, and Jeff, when I go through those survey results, it's kind of head spinning. Some of the questions, you think, oh, now I see the answers, and maybe we could have asked it a different way, or we should have. And, there's chart after chart. I just wondered if you guys could put your heads together and see if you could really distill some of the key takeaways for us.
That was going to be our goal, Bill. Yeah, we're going to dissect each of them and analyze them and just not throw graphs out there. You might have seen a few graphs thrown out there in some of the council packets. That's just for informative purposes for them when they were making decisions. But yeah, something I discussed with Jeff already about dissecting them and putting them and showing trends and showing where there's some maybe disconnect from one answer to another answer. I figured one example, for example, I'll just throw off the top of my head was the public is really supportive of the city acquiring waterfront land, but they were really on the negative side for acquiring land just for parks purposes so far in the responses. So it kind of seems to conflict, not quite conflict, but there's a disparity there. They want more public land on the waterfront, but they don't want the city to buy up more land for public parks. And now part of the problem with that is we can get a lot of details like, well, what is that person thinking about when we say park? Some people are thinking about playgrounds and shelters. Some other people might be just thinking about open space. So those questions, the lack of being able to have a significant public forum where you have the public attend a meeting, that's where the surveys kind of don't do justice to the planning process, because you can't actually have that two-way communication with the public in real time. But so yeah, Bill, we'll do our best to try to dissect and explain the results.
Great. I mean, we'll look at them too, because people can, derive different answers from results. But yeah, if you guys could just give us a little shortcut about the very key findings, that would really be great.
Definitely do that.
Great.
Thank you. Any other questions about the next, the process for the February 4th meeting? Any member comments? Okay, with no other
I
comments.
guess real quick, Jeff, do we have anything coming up for our regular meeting on the 21st of January? Knock, knock.
I don't believe so. I have one or two potential things, but I don't believe we've received.
We do. We might have one thing. The city council at the last city council meeting had asked to reconsider allowing outdoor dining temporarily for this year, and they wanted to potentially get the planning commission's feedback on that if that was still something that they want to see for the year, and some other administrative ordinances we made last year for the COVID pandemic.
Oh, okay.
So they wanted, yeah, that's the only thing I can think of though.
All right, so we may or may not have a meeting on January 21st. It just depends on if you can pull all those ideas together for presentation to the commission. The reason I asked the question is because I haven't gotten anything to review yet. And I know the deadline is a month before the meeting. And Jeff and I, we've been talking about a lot of different things, but none of them have related to items for the agenda.
Yeah. We had some old business on guest quarters. You guys are going to do some research about the genesis of the restrictions on that and come back to us, and we could finish that discussion.
Yes.
We will have.
I think potentially signs were there too, and I haven't finished all my research on that yet, and been a little busy, but we'll get there.
So no applications from the public at this point, and that, you're right, we're almost at that deadline, so.
Well, we've passed the deadline for
Past
public.
Oh,
things.
right, we changed the deadline, sorry.
Okay,
The deadline would have been today, and we did not receive anything. We do have a couple things that are potentially in the works that we may be seeing. We will have our meeting in January regardless, either way, for the issues that Victor mentioned and whatnot. Also, January is our meeting where we have to set our schedule for the new year now. We also then at that meeting have to reaffirm the chair position and do a couple other general maintenance things for the course of the next year. So
Okay.
that'll be the things on the focus for the January meeting.
perfect.
Great.
Glad I asked.
Any other member comments? With that, we can adjourn.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everybody. Thanks a
Be
lot.
stay warm.
All right.
Bye.
No.
Bye.
Bye.